Good morning, DawgNation. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Marco's Pizza. Hope your day is going well. I'm excited about our show today. Jeff Sintel coming up, a lot of recruiting talk to get into with Jeff. He was also at the open practice on Saturday, really loaded up the forum with some observations from practice. I'm going to pick Jeff's brain about that a little bit more on today's program as well, and we'll talk about a couple of recruits who are about to be in the spotlight here over the course of the next couple of weeks. That's going to be a lot of fun. But I want to begin the show today, though, by talking about Zamir White and what I thought was one of the real positive stories to come out of the weekend for UGA. I'll kind of explain why and sort of make my prediction for how the Georgia offense with White as a part of it might look here for 2018. I think it's going to be great. I'm glad you're with us. DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, begins right now.
From DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Marco's Pizza. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
We were talking before the show. We number the podcast episodes for the purposes of sort of cataloging them on. If you listen on Apple Podcasts or the SoundCloud, something like that, it's just sort of easy to keep up with them by sort of numbering the podcasts. So this is our actual number 755 today, in honor of the home run king, who I believe is the real home run king in a Major League Baseball, Hank Aaron. We'll do DawgNation Daily, episode number 755 today. It's kind of an exciting thing to think about, and we think we've got a really fun show sort of planned in regards to that. Let me go back to Friday for a moment, and I love when Kirby Smart does these things. He likes playing games with the media. He likes, he's sort of aware of the questions I think he's going to be asked, and as he explained at one point on Friday, let me try to head a couple of these off at the pass here. Let me try to get something out before y'all have a chance to ask about it. And he goes in this long litany of descriptions of injuries and who's recovered and kind of who's ready to go. And in the midst of this, he sort of drops in a little bit of a nugget about the nation's number one running back from 2018, Zamir White. And I thought this was funny because obviously White's importance to Georgia, with all due respect to guys like Azeez Ojulari and Devon Wilson, who's still a ways away from being ready, Jaden Hunter. White's importance obviously outsized and compared to some of the other guys from Georgia who've dealt with injuries. I wanted to play you the entire thing of Smart just sort of rattling them all off with Zamir White kind of hidden in the middle like an Easter egg, but the truth is the clip was going to end up being too long. So nonetheless, let me go back to Friday with Kirby Smart delivering some good news that Zamir White, who had injured his knee back during his high school season there in Laurinburg, North Carolina, that's all good, and Zamir White's all ready to go. Here's Kirby on that.
Zamir will be full go with a protective brace. He'll have his brace on, but we'll just have to monitor his volume. But he's not going to be limited in any way. He should be able to do all drills, and he's just gaining confidence on that thing on his knee, but the brace will just help him with that.
So that's obviously good news for Georgia fans, but there is this thought of, okay, exactly what does that mean? Can you be a little bit more specific about what cleared to practice means here? Obviously this is a player that a lot of Georgia fans are very keenly interested in, and Georgia's success in terms of maybe getting back to college football playoff in some form or fashion could depend on Zamir White. Can you give me a little more details here? And Kirby Smart was kind enough to provide some of those as well.
He's in a very similar situation to when I arrived with Nick Chubb. I mean, he went through spring, and it kind of reminded me of Chubb, where, y'all saw Nick out there doing things that first spring back. He was able to do some ball handling, do some things like that. That's kind of where Zamir's been. He did a very similar protocol to what Nick did, whether it was karate, did a lot of things getting on the ground on mats, learning to fall again, getting confidence in his knee, and that's been a big part of his rehab. I mean, if anything, at this point, I would say he's ahead of where Nick was his junior year, because his injury was not quite as significant as Nick's was at the time. So been very pleased with that. He understands things. He was able to get a lot of mental reps in the spring, but he's cleared to do everything. I think the big issue there is not necessarily is he cleared, it's what kind of volume can he handle. Can he handle 7,000 yards on our GPS at practice? I don't know. We've got to monitor that and see where he hits each day and make sure we bring him back at the right pace.
When I first heard that audio clip from Kirby Smart and he mentioned 7,000 yards, I didn't realize he was talking about GPS track yards at practice. I thought he was making a prediction for a career, and I was like, wow, that's a pretty bold statement from Kirby Smart. And then when you listen to it a little bit more clearly, you realize exactly what it is. But there are a couple things there that Smart says that I think are really interesting. Ahead of where Chubb was back in 2016. That's going to be important for reasons that I'll explain in a moment. The injury that White suffered in his senior year of high school there in North Carolina, not as significant as the one that Chubb suffered in 2015. I'm going to talk more about why I think that could be significant here in a moment as well, because we have a track record for what Nick Chubb was able to do, and it's sort of dangerous to extrapolate too much here. Players are different, even if the injuries are different. It's sort of hard to make the comparison on this here for a moment, but that's not going to stop me from trying to do this a little bit later on. But the overall sort of short takeaway is when you hear Kirby Smart say those kinds of things about Zamir White at the start of practice, I think there's no other way to take that if you're a UGA fan other than this is really good news. Not necessarily unexpected news, but really good news that Zamir White is going to be near the center of attention for the Georgia offense here during the start of summer practice. I thought when Chip Towers was on our program yesterday, I thought that he had some really interesting things to say about Zamir White. And to start off with here, Chip agreeing with me and obviously echoing the sentiments of many of you that having Zamir White cleared and ready to go, that ain't nothing but good if you're a UGA fan.
I mean, I was talking about it at the end of spring practice. I couldn't believe how much he was cutting and moving and jumping and running and kind of doing everything all the other tailbacks were doing just without contact. And then we see some social media posts over the summer, showing Zamir White working out in the indoor practice facility and doing some taekwondo and jiu-jitsu and everything else with really no problems at all. So you got the feeling that he was going to be able to do a lot, in the preseason. But to say that he was quote-unquote full go, I think those two words were very, very encouraging to the Bulldog Nation.
Very encouraging to the Bulldog Nation, no doubt about that. But there's something else that Chip said yesterday about Zamir White that I actually wanted to play again because I think it's interesting. That we actually, because of the depth of the Georgia roster here, we almost move into a position where Georgia's in a luxury position of Zamir White's ready to go, but it can also take its time and Kirby Smart and Jim Chaney can take their time, Dale McGee weighing in on this subject too, take their time on how much they want to use Zamir White. Just because he's cleared to go doesn't mean you have to rush him out there with 30 carries in the very first game against Austin Peay. You can sort of take your time here on this and sort of slowly work him into the fold offensively if you want to. I thought that Chip made an interesting point when he joined us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, on that subject yesterday.
Here's the bottom line, Brandon. You don't have to risk this guy because you're in such good stead at the tailback position. You got plenty of other depth, so you don't really have to risk it. So just because he can go doesn't mean that he will go. But I imagine, based on what we're seeing in camp, that you'll see Zamir White very, very early. And if he proves to be everything everybody thought he was in recruiting, I would imagine it's just a matter of time before he's a part of the regular rotation.
Part of the regular rotation at running back for Georgia. And here is where I may get myself in some trouble because I'm going to try to do a little math here. And this is pretty shaky science. I'm not going to deny that. But I do think this sort of leads to something kind of interesting for UGA. Let's go back to what Kirby Smart said earlier. He's ahead, Zamir White, of where Chubb was in 2016, and the injury wasn't as significant. Well, that year for Chubb in 2016, where he was maybe off to a little slower start back in the spring than Zamir White was, Chubb still ran for 1,130 yards in 2016 behind an offensive line I think we would all sort of objectively say is inferior to the one that Zamir White would likely be running behind here in 2018. Is it reasonable to think that Zamir White could give Georgia at least 1,130 yards here in his freshman season? That may sound like a lot, but Georgia's got a recent history of seeing freshman running backs go north of 1,000 yards. Todd Gurley did it for Georgia in 2012. Nick Chubb did it for Georgia in 2014. Chubb had nearly 1,500 yards in 2014, and obviously that's a pretty rarefied air comparison when it comes to Zamir White to put him in the same category of Todd Gurley and Nick Chubb. But let's not forget, this was the nation's #1 running back. So my best guess here is it's not unreasonable to think that Zamir White could give you the 1,130 yards that Nick Chubb gave you in 2016 coming off his injury year. And at that point in time, you're kind of in the ballpark of maybe being able to replicate the offensive production that Nick Chubb and Sony Michel gave you in tandem for 2017. Because obviously that's one of the big questions facing Georgia. Can you replace Nick Chubb? Can you replace Sony Michel? That group working together did so many good things for Georgia. But when you factor in what White may be able to do, based on the way I just described, with what DeAndre Swift may be able to do, maybe you can sort of get to that total. Because think about Swift here for a moment. Swift in his freshman season, what does he go? 81 carries for 618 yards. That gets you to 7.63 yards per carry. Compare that to Sony Michel's freshman season, where he was 6.41 yards per carry on 410 rushing yards, 64 carries. Well, there was a big breakthrough for Sony Michel in his sophomore season. He ends up going 1,161 yards in his sophomore season. So big breakthrough for Sony Michel in year 2. What if DeAndre Swift has the same kind of breakthrough? If he has the same kind of thing, and you pair that with what I just described from Zamir White, then you're back, like nearly 2,300 yards for the tandem here between Zamir White and DeAndre Swift. And at that point in time, you're in the same ballpark of doing what Nick Chubb and Sony Michel did a season ago. Now, listen. The odds are the math is probably not going to be quite as clean and nice and tidy as I just made it out to be, but it's also not impossible to think that Zamir White and DeAndre Swift together could be able to do something at least similar to what Sony Michel and Nick Chubb did back in 2017. My point in saying all this is there's a track record to support that kind of belief. And I do think that UGA fans should be celebrating what Kirby Smart said on Friday. Having Zamir White back practice again right now means it's only that much more likely that he will be a big part of the offensive game plan for Georgia's first big game against South Carolina on the road in Week 2. And you better believe the Gamecocks are sweating that out right now. They know that the presence of Zamir White makes the Georgia offense that much tougher to stop and, frankly, that much more fun to watch for UGA fans. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. I don't throw a lot of stats around in the program, but it seemed appropriate there at that time. But nonetheless, we're glad to have you with us here today, whether you be watching us live on video every morning, 10 a.m., DawgNation Facebook, DawgNation YouTube page, or the DawgNation Twitter feed. We're glad to have you with us for that. You can also check out the radio program at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref and in podcast form. Pretty much wherever podcasts are found. Apple Podcasts, the Android device will get you on the Google Podcast Player there, the world-famous DawgNation.com. We are just really, really glad you have found DawgNation Daily here today. And, of course, it's all brought to you by Marco's Pizza. And Marco's right now invites you to enjoy a tasty two-a-day. And with Marco's Pizza, you can get 2 medium, 2-topping pizzas from Marco's for an everyday low price of just $6.99 each. That's right, no special coupon, no promo code to remember. Just $6.99 each for 2 medium, 2-topping pizzas. Just simply go to Marcos.com. You can find the Marcos nearest you and take advantage of that offer. Every store, every day, the Italian way. It's at Marcos.com for more information on that. We got Jeff Sindell coming up in just a moment. A lot of recruiting talk to kind of get into with Jeff. But before we do that with Jeff, I do kind of want to dive in here to another subject, which I think is going to be really important for Georgia fans to observe here over the course of these 2018 summer practices here. Let me go back to the spring here for a moment, when one of the guys that Kirby Smart sort of talked candidly about was the former 5-star prospect from Brooklyn, New York, Isaiah Wilson, who in his freshman season of 2017 was probably not ready to go, not ready to compete and contribute the way that his freshman counterpart Andrew Thomas probably was. But this spring, apparently, Isaiah Wilson was starting to show some glimpses of maybe having a breakout campaign in what would be his redshirt freshman year coming up here this upcoming season. Let's go back to the spring to hear Kirby on Isaiah Wilson, and then we'll update that based on what we've seen this week. Here's Kirby from back in spring.
I think he's learned a little bit more about how to compete. When you got to come over and block Lorenzo, Davin, Trenton, those guys all day, it certainly makes you come to work. It's a lot better than sitting over there watching somebody else do it and blocking a scout team guy. So he went over there and competed and got better during that time, and he's continued to improve throughout the spring. But he still has a ways to go. We still have a ways to go with the offensive line. There's a couple guys in there playing really well, but that's one of those positions that he's got to compete and he's got to grow as a player to get to where he can be and perform at the same level the tackles did last year.
There's a strategy I try to use in terms of trying to figure out what's going on with Georgia football, because obviously none of us get to see the full story at Georgia practices, and even being a media member, you only get to see a small glimpse of what's actually happening on the practice field. So I try to listen closely to what Kirby Smart says, and does he keep the same trend direction going when he talks about certain players? With Isaiah Wilson, there was some up and down moments if you want to go back to last summer. But lately, it does seem it's all moving in the positive direction. We have seen Wilson, once again, even this week, taking those first-team reps there at right tackle. Mostly complimentary words there from Kirby Smart, although candid about saying that Wilson needed to learn to compete. Well, it sounds like whatever Wilson needed to learn, he's truly taking that to heart, because when Georgia offensive coordinator Jim Chaney met with the media this week, I thought one of the most interesting things that Chaney had to offer was his take on Isaiah Wilson. Listen, Wilson's an important player for Georgia. You got to have your 5-star guys playing at a 5-star level on the field if you want to truly maximize your roster. Plus, that right tackle spot that Andrew Thomas occupied a season ago, with him moving over to left tackle, that's one of those positions you circle to say you got to have a high-level player playing in that spot. Well, it sounds like Jim Chaney thinks that Isaiah Wilson maybe has a chance to be that guy. Here is Chaney on the young redshirt freshman from Brooklyn.
You can't replace his mass and athleticism. What he's had to do is learn the speed of the game and how fast and how physical this game is. And he's gotten better at that. Every day of practice, you see him improve. Where he is today and when he walks out of Georgia is going to be an incredible jump. There's no doubt about it. But I would also add, from where he walked in the door to where he is now has been an incredible jump. He's done a real good job at working his butt off. It's very important to him. He's a large body. He can do things wrong, and they got to run around a mountain to get to the quarterback. So that's a good thing for us. We like those big kids. You guys know that. And what you've got to understand, when you go big and you try to develop a team the way we try to do it with physical play in the line of scrimmage, we're going to try to beat you up front. Now, with that, there are some inherent fleas that come with it. Some quicker little D linemen might give us a little bit of trouble. But we think by the end of the game, beating on you and pounding on you, our bigs will overcome. And that's kind of where we're looking at. But back to Isaiah, I think he's progressing as planned, and he's got to continue to learn the game of football and continue to practice hard and continue to compete to get playing time.
So he says that at the end there, Wilson's obviously got to keep it up, but that's not hollow praise that he offers there at the beginning. That's a pretty nice level of compliment there from Chaney in Isaiah Wilson's direction. And I also think it's kind of interesting to hear that insight into the Georgia offensive game plan. Chaney admitting we do like these big offensive linemen. That does give Wilson a leg up in a competition like this because of what his mass brings to the table for that Georgia offensive line. And as he goes, maybe so goes the Georgia offense here this season. It's good to have you with us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza. Hope you enjoy Jeff Sintel right now. We'll actually get Jeff. We got Jeff. Okay, we'll get Jeff coming up here in just a minute. Good stuff coming from Jeff Sintel today. I'm also going to tell you a little bit later on in our broadcast about two really interesting things that we have coming up, both tomorrow with our return of Before the Hedges. Jeff and I are going to talk about that in a moment. It's tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern time. We'll address that here during our interview with Jeff in just a second. And I'm going to talk more about the DawgNation season kickoff coming up later on in the month of August as well. So we'll do a lot of that kind of stuff before we're done here on the program, but a lot to get into with Jeff, who was at the open practice on Saturday and is all over every situation with UJ recruiting right now. It's always fun to have him as a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All, and we hope you enjoy right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Jeff Sintel has been a busy man as of late, and it's fun to catch up with him today on our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All to discuss what happened in Athens on Saturday. Jeff was a part of that. Also take a look at everything happening with the UGA recruiting. Jeff, thanks for being back here on our DawgNation Daily here today. Hope you're doing well.
Hey, Brandon, man, I'm great. Great, man. Hey, I hope everybody's excited about BT8 starting back up tomorrow.
That's exactly right, Jeff. You and I are going to talk a lot about that before we're done here, about making sure everybody sets that appointment to catch up with us tomorrow afternoon as we talk a little UGA recruiting. But before we kind of get into the latest on Georgia recruiting here as a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All, let me go back to some of the kids that you covered last year heading up towards National Signing Day 2018, specifically Zamir White, the freshman running back. I talked a lot about Zamir before you joined us on the show here today. I think that Kirby Smart giving him the all-clear to practice, I think that's big news for UGA fans. I think you can start looking at some of the recent track record of Georgia running backs and say, can White give you what Nick Chubb gave you in his injury recovery season of 2016? Can DeAndre Swift be as good as a sophomore as Sony Michel was in his sophomore season of 2015? And then that pair of Swift and White all of a sudden in the same ballpark as maybe what Chubb and Michel did a season ago in their final year of 2017. I mean, what are your expectations from Zamir White, having seen him practice in person on Saturday?
Well, Brandon, I guess it just, well, first of all, the young man still does it west, even in Georgia heat. Still looks like it's the same young man that ran up and down the practice fields in Laurinburg, North Carolina. But just what I see, Brandon, when I look at all the running back situation at Georgia, and that's Swift, and then especially the young guys with Harrion, well, not so much Harrion, but the young guys with James Cook and Zamir. I just see, and I'm not in the hot take business, Brandon. I'm trying to give this like slow roasted, well well-heated take, I guess, a little bit on like a big green egg or something like that. But I simply see Cook and White having as much talent as anybody Georgia has brought in during their freshman seasons to play running back. And then I also see they will be paired up with as fine an offensive line group as I think Georgia has had in the last 20 years. I think the combination of those skill sets plus those road graders in front of them are going to allow whoever's carrying the ball for the University of Georgia in that backfield to have some prolific Saturday afternoons for the Bulldogs.
It's interesting. Let me try that one more time. It is interesting that you mentioned James Cook in this conversation as well, because, Jeff, I'll admit I've sort of operated under the assumption that Cook, as an incoming freshman, he might, sort of suffer in comparison to guys like Elijah Holyfield and Brian Herring, who just have more time in the system. Do you agree with me that Holyfield and Herring's experience gives them a leg up over Cook, or does his dazzling athleticism just become too much for those guys to match in terms of this competition to see who can really kind of be what I think of as that number 3 running back?
Well, I think, Brandon, it's all about matchups, and simply from the play caller's perspective is getting the ball in the hands of your playmakers. And when I see any way that Georgia can get the ball to James Cook out in flat, it is just simply not a good thought for any defensive coordinator that tries to match up a linebacker or a safety on a guy like James Cook. I mean, Brandon, James Cook, when you would go see him at those prospect camps, he would be lining up at receiver and beating 5-star cornerbacks down the field, whether it's a post pattern, whether it's a streak pattern, or whether it's something across the middle. I mean, James Cook is just an elite receiver coming into the college game. The way he runs with the certain body lean, the way he just moves in and out of his breaks, the way he catches the ball effortlessly. You look at Georgia's running back contingent, and I see a guy like White and maybe Elijah Holyfield as guys that just can really hit it upside between the tackles and really just work out A-gap and B-gap for the Bulldogs. And then I see a diverse talent like DeAndre Swift. I see Brian Herring especially, and I see a guy like James Cook as guys that can really have a lot of fun out there on the edges, especially when everybody has to worry about Georgia's receiving core, the tight ends, and then the amount of personnel they have to put in the box to worry about Georgia's run game. I mean, it's just Georgia's running backs in the foreseeable future are going to be bad news for a lot of SEC teams.
One of the things that you mentioned on Saturday when you were writing in the forum about the open practice was what you saw happening at the quarterback position. Obviously, no surprise that Jake Fromm and Justin Fields working as the first and second quarterback, but there's a huge question about who Georgia's number 3 quarterback is going to be. A collection of walk-ons here, but also maybe in an emergency spot duty, maybe another player gets sort of moved over there to contribute. It sounds like you saw some of Mecole Hardman in that role on Saturday. He's no stranger to taking snaps back in his high school career of Elbert County, but can you dive a little deeper on what you saw from Mecole on Saturday?
Well, you look at. Well, I mean, I think it's the one storyline. I don't know if not a lot of people have covered yet in their preseason coverage, and that was what would happen if Georgia had to go to a third quarterback. And you don't have to wish harm on anybody. You could say something like a sickness, or you could say something as simple as one guy out with an ankle, one guy out with a concussion protocol, or then maybe just the other guy gets his helmet taken off during the play. And that would lead to, I think, a very interesting question for Georgia football. And that would be, who would be the number 3 quarterback in an emergency situation? Would it be one of those preferred walk-ons that came on? Would it be John Setter, who was in the program last year? Would it be Matthew Downing, a guy who looked pretty good, especially on the underneath throws during the open practice on Saturday? Or would it be a guy like Mecole Hardman, who was a dangerous, everything you could ask for running quarterback for Elbert County during his high school years? And he's got a lot of experience kind of running that offense. And I know people wonder about the thoughts of Mecole Hardman throwing the ball, but Mecole Hardman running the ball in the open field is very interesting. But to me, it becomes tantalizing for the big play potential for the offense if you have him perhaps in short yardage situations, and he's running a play where maybe on one side of him is DeAndre Swift, and on the other side of him might be Brian Herring or even Zamir White or even James Cook. And the ability of that guy to catch the edge and have the ability to make the right read, whether to keep it or pitch it out, there are going to be some very frustrated defensive ends and outside linebackers that would have to deal with that level of athleticism for Georgia. Should they go to some sort of short yardage or red zone package, and it would include the name Mecole Hardman.
So you saw him Saturday actually taking some snaps in that situation then?
Yeah, of course. It was like a play polish drill where they were doing a lot of their reads and their keys. It wasn't polished against there. There were some defenders kind of just mucked up in there a little bit or stationed there a little bit, and Mecole Hardman was taking snaps, and he was sometimes given the pitch, putting the ball in the belly of a James Cook or a DeAndre Swift or a Zamir White, and then other times he would keep it and just scoot around the corner for likely just carrying out the play. That's something that if a smart football team wants to prepare for every contingency, I think Mecole Hardman is definitely a logical candidate for an emergency quarterback type situation.
It's our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All. We do it every Tuesday here on DawgNation Daily with Jeff Sintel. And by the way, if you want to know all the great things going on at the Marlowe's closest to you, become a Marlowe's Insider. Text the word Marlowe's, M-A-R-L-O-W-S, to 24242. Once again, that's the word Marlowe's, M-A-R-L-O-W-S, no apostrophe, to the number 24242. You can become a Marlowe's Insider. You can find out about great events. We'll be at some Marlowe's Taverns coming up here in just a couple of weeks. You can also find out about some great offers. I know I got a lot of tweets going back to the 4th of July when Marlowe's once again did their red, white, and blue burger celebration when they were actually giving away free burgers there on the 4th of July. And the way to find out about that was to have been a Marlowe's Insider. So become a Marlowe's Insider, and you can get the next big giveaway and special offer going on at the Marlowe's Tavern closest to you. Jeff, something else from the open practice on Saturday that I saw and really found to be kind of interesting. Some of the photos that you took of incoming freshman outside linebacker Brenton Cox. And I had seen Cox going back to the Touchdown Club of Atlanta event in January. I already thought he was pretty good shape, at least based on how a young man looks wearing a suit and tie. But seeing photos of him in his jersey from Saturday, I mean, this looks like a guy who's ready to play. I'm no scout. I'm not going to pretend to be one. But, boy, he looks all SEC, every bit the part of that. When you see him in that jersey on Saturday, would you agree with that assessment of Brenton Cox?
Yeah, Brandon, you just notice things. It seems like Georgia usually has an analyst or a graduate assistant that is always at Brenton Cox's side, giving him advice and sharing, input and thoughts and coaching points. Dollops of it when every chance comes around to make a correction or a tweak. He's a guy, Brandon, that I remember when he was being recruited down the stretch. It was really, things got really big for Georgia right after the Auburn game. And what Georgia told him is that they want the defensive end, the outside linebacker, that could hold up in the run game, that could have the strength and the power to hold up at the point of attack and either make the play or force the play back inside, but also be that quick guy around the edge with all the moves to affect the launch point and really get after the quarterback. And Brenton looks like he's every bit 6'4", 6'5", about 245, 255 right now. Looks like he has tremendous ability to do all that. And Brenton is a guy, to me, it's hard to believe that he's already spent about 7.9 months at Georgia. That's a lot of Sinclair's strength and conditioning program. That's a lot of the training table, and he's another guy to me that looks like he's changed his body a little bit. I mean, Brandon, I don't want to be someone that starts crowning guys, I guess, before the first day of full pads in practice. But every time the name Brenton Cox crosses my mind, I think definite contributor for the Bulldogs in 2018.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that based on what I think it is that I know. All right, let's shift gears here. Let's talk about some actual 2019 recruiting stuff for a moment. You've recently had a really good interview with DJ Daniel, the junior college defensive back who's been thought to be close to making a decision now for a while. He does make it official on his Twitter feed here. August 16th, I guess, is going to be the date when Daniel makes his decision here. Tell us what we need to know about this one more time before next week, I guess, is the time it'll actually come out and the decision will be made. But preview the DJ Daniel announcement for us here a little bit. Where do you think things stand between he and Georgia right now, and what is there to like about Daniel from the perspective of a UGA fan here at the moment?
Well, Daniel fits what Georgia's looking for there in terms of adaptable defensive backs. type of guy that could play safety, could play the nickel, but could also get up in a tremendous number one receiver space and play that press man coverage. I think that's what DJ Daniel excels at. He's about 6 feet and about 185 pounds, 190 pounds almost now, and he's a guy, you know, it's not Georgia's preference. A favorite story I have here about Daniel is Georgia wasn't in the junior college business. They weren't in the junior college defensive back business. They feel like they'd rather take guys that they can develop and bring along and teach them over the course of a career the exact way they want a Georgia defensive back to play the game. And then they saw DJ Daniel, and then they're like, you know, you just throw your hands up in the air, whatever you want to do to describe it. They're like, to heck with that. This guy is simply a guy we've got to have in the program. He deserves to be at the top of the board, and he's a guy that Georgia is going to come out with full vigor and everything they got on the recruiting trail. And it was just, you just look at a guy like DJ Daniel. I saw him run multiple 4.4 40-yard dashes in heavy grass during late summer conditioning at Georgia Military College. Rates as the nation's number 5 overall junior college prospect, and he rates as the number 2 cornerback among the junior college ranks right now. And Brandon, kind of the big picture stuff there is Georgia stands at 17 commitments. Could they get to 23 or 24? That's going to depend a lot on program attrition, but also guys that have such a great 2018 year that they become high value draft targets by Roger Goodell and company for the 2019 NFL draft. And that might open up a couple more slots in the class, but you look at what Georgia has left to me, and the major focus the Bulldogs will have left for the 2019 recruiting class, it's pretty simple. That's going to be the defensive back position. And DJ Daniel is a guy that definitely fits that bill.
All right, it's our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All with Jeff Sintel here on DawgNation Daily. Become a Marlowe's Insider by texting the word Marlowe's to 24242. You can find out about special offers and big upcoming events at your local Marlowe's, including appearances by Jeff Sintel, me, and a whole host of DawgNation favorites here in the weeks ahead. Let me mention a name we haven't talked about in a while, Jeff, but I wanted to – I don't know. I guess I was sort of thinking about something we talked about last week in the aftermath of whatever is going on at Ohio State. Another name that I mentioned here who may be forced to reconsider the Buckeyes, maybe Brian Brzee, the nation's top prospect for 2020. I know that as of late it seems like maybe Brzee's trending in the Penn State direction, also a bit too, but we know he's got a Georgia visit, I think, planned for the upcoming football season. He's taken his share of visits here as of late. Ohio State still in the mix here. Do you think that the calculus for Brzee changes at all, given the fact that Ohio State may not be quite as attractive at a destination by the time you get to next December?
Well, Brandon, I don't know. Let me add a market correction a little bit to that storyline you got going through your head right now. And really, Brandon, he's just taking visits, and Brzee is taking the visits to other schools that Georgia just kind of lined up in an ideal situation. He came to see Georgia back-to-back months. He knew he wanted to come back to Georgia before the end of his first visit. He returned to Georgia for G-Day. He brought a lot of family with him. I truly believe that there are only a few schools, maybe even 2 schools, that Brian Brzee is really, really in for at this time, and I do think the University of Georgia is one of those schools. And I also think that Brzee has also already stated that he's going to come back for a game this fall. Now, when you're talking about a young man from Maryland, and I don't know how much better of a position Georgia can put themselves in. Brzee also immersed himself very well with a bunch of Georgia commits at the Nike opening, so he knows a lot about the program. I think Nolan Smith told me that when Brzee visits Georgia in 2019, that Nolan's going to basically volunteer to be his host because those two guys get along so well. They have a lot of similar mindsets in a lot of areas. I think Brzee, the nation's number 1 overall defensive lineman for the class of 2020, and also the number 1 overall prospect for 2020. I think Brzee is going to be a name that you're going to see on a lot of wish lists for Georgia. The 2020 defensive class, my friend, especially on the defensive line for Georgia. I know a lot of people worry about that position. I think that defensive line class ultimately will include a lot of names that are going to be top 150 type players in 2020.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how that 2020 group might come together and make all the concerns about defensive line seem very quaint and sort of old-fashioned when you think about what could happen by the time you get to the next recruiting cycle there in 2020. And it's recruiting analysis like that that's going to be so much fun to get from Jeff as a part of Before the Hedges return tomorrow afternoon right here on the DawgNation video channels. No matter how you get this, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, you can get the return of Before the Hedges there at 3 p.m. on Wednesday. Jeff, I've also committed to making this available as a podcast. A lot of people have asked me about that. And, Jeff, if you don't mind, let me bring this up with you as well. Something that somebody asked me the other day was, hey, we hear you guys talking a lot. Is Before the Hedges going to be different? I think that you and I both are very committed to this, to make Before the Hedges a different kind of recruiting conversation than we have anywhere else. And I know for you personally, based on some of the conversations we've had behind the scenes here, a lot of your best stuff, it sounds like you're going to be debuting on Before the Hedges. So before you read it on the Centel Intel or hear us talk about it on DawgNation Daily, a lot of this stuff is actually going to originate right there in Before the Hedges. So over the course of the next few weeks, the next few months, I think it's safe to say, Jeff, that some recruiting news is actually going to break on Before the Hedges, which is going to be a lot of fun for me personally to be a part of.
Well, I think, Brandon, I don't know about you, but we had two shows before. It was the Wednesday night show, which was basically I would present a few topics and we would kick around a few narratives. But after a while, it's just going to be me taking questions and just answering stream of consciousness questions whatsoever. I'm really kind of committed to the. We do have we've secured Brandon's solid commitment for a full hour of his time on Wednesdays now. So I think a lot of what that show's going to look like is going to be Brandon and Jeff and the fans for maybe the back half or the back 30% of the show, maybe 40, 50% of the show. But I think that first half, to me, should be really streamlined, things to know, names to hear from, personalities to get to know. It's going to be a formatted kind of recruiting digest with a lot of studio bells and whistles, which is what we had before with the previous incarnation of Before the Hedges. I mean, we're going to see some one-on-one interviews there. We're going to see some highlight tapes. We're going to see some breakdowns. And sooner or later, maybe we might even have the ultimate prize that we're looking for, which might even be a decision on one of those shows as well. But the main thing is it gets Brandon, I think, who, as far as in this lane in terms of showrunners or show hosts, I think Brandon knows as much about recruiting, especially from an informed listener, an informed person that can kind of direct a lot of thought. I think Brandon's going to be very good in that role. Maybe he might not be good in the role of writing about whether Kirby Smart was a success at the University of Georgia heading into his time at Georgia. But I promise you this, guys out there, I'm going to make one solid commitment right now. If my man Brandon ever comes to me with an idea for the show that says, yeah, there are only 2 commitments for the class of 2020. What's wrong with Georgia's class of 2020 recruiting? We're going to walk that one back in pretty clear fashion because I don't want you to have another big-sized egg on your face in about a year, sir.
Yeah, Jeff, that's really fun stuff. I'll explain what we're talking about here in just a moment. That's a really, really funny stuff. And, Jeff, I'm excited about tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, the return of Before the Hedges. Thanks so much for being with us here today. And, by the way, thanks for the folks from Marlowe's Tavern bringing the Marlowe's Tavern tell-all to us each and every day. Jeff, I look forward to speaking to you tomorrow.
All right, guys. Have yourself a good week.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So what Jeff is referencing there at the end of our conversation, I actually got a chance to write today for DawgNation.com. Now, listen, I don't want to spend too much time on this because we got a lot of stuff we got to do here, but I've been pushing to write for quite a while. The problem is I'm not a trained writer. Listen, I mean, a lot of the guys and gals that have worked around here have gone to school for this kind of stuff. They've learned all about this kind of stuff. Y'all know I'm just a knucklehead who speaks into a microphone. So sometimes my sentence structure may not be quite perfect. I may not be quite the trained writer, but I've been begging to be allowed to show up on print here at DawgNation. The bosses have said, no, 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 no. Brandon, we want you to keep doing what you're doing here. BA, we want to keep you locked in the studio. Well, finally this morning, I got a chance to right before the hedges. You may see, not before the hedges. That's tomorrow. I wrote Good Day UGA this morning. I wrote the Good Day UGA blog this morning. Got a chance to do that. And I had some fun exploring why it is that maybe I'm not allowed to write more on DawgNation. I went back and looked at what I called the worst column in DawgNation history. It was a piece that I wrote back in November of 2015 before Kirby Smart took the Georgia job. Explaining all the reasons why Kirby might be kind of a hire too risky for UGA to make. It seemed like a good idea at the time. It's a total, travesty now. I'm sort of hoping one day this thing just sort of gets scrubbed from the internet, but for now it's still there, so I said, why not allow people to mock me for it? So check out Good Day UGA at DawgNation.com, and you can see that. I had some fun at my own expense there in that regard, and really looking forward to Before the Hedges tomorrow, presented by Kroger. That is going to be a lot of fun with Jeff Sintel. All right, let me take care of some business. I'm going to try to move kind of fast here. ESPN has ranked its top 50 players in college football. I've already heard from some of you on this that did not think Georgia was treated too kindly in the piece from ESPN. There were 2 Georgia players on the list. You can probably guess if there's only 2. Actually, you might not guess, because DeAndre Baker, unless I just missed his name, was missing from this list, which seems kind of weird given where he's sort of ranked on a lot of these other lists. But Jake Fromm does come in at number 30. DeAndre Swift comes in at number 33. So a couple Georgia players made the list. If the best 2 players that Georgia has this season are only the 30th and 33rd best player in the country, then Georgia's in some real trouble. I don't take this list all that seriously necessarily, because I think that, Jeff just sort of rattled off some of the freshmen that he thinks will be competing and playing well for Georgia here this season. I think there's some rising sophomores, guys like Richard LeCounte, who are going to make strong contributions. I think there are plenty of players for Georgia who are ready to make sort of a top 50 player in the country-like contribution for UJ potentially. They just may not be all that famous yet, but it's obviously going to happen. You may be blown away by the number of Alabama players who show up on this top 50. You got Tua Tagovailoa, Damian Harris, Raekwon Davis, Jonah Williams, on and on you go here. Mack Wilson in terms of Alabama players playing there. But I don't believe for a moment this Alabama roster is all that much more talented than Georgia's. It may be slightly more talented given Alabama's long-term recruiting success, but it is not dramatically more talented. Now, we're also in kind of an age where ESPN and Alabama are awful cozy with each other lately, man. They are awful cozy with each other. You got Saban participating in television series. You got him on the cover of ESPN, the magazine, so maybe this is part of that cozy relationship that Bama and Saban and Alabama are enjoying right now. But obviously, kind of an interesting look there from ESPN at who they view as the top 50 players in college football here for this season. Speaking of Alabama, by the way, I thought this was kind of interesting. I don't know much about this player, but his name is Ali Cahoe. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. He's from Reno, Nevada. He's a former 5-star linebacker, signed with Washington in December, but now he wants to leave the program, and the Seattle Times is reporting that Alabama is one of the schools that is potentially in the mix here for Cahoe, assuming I'm pronouncing that correctly. What's interesting here is Chris Peterson spoke about Cahoe during a recent media availability. Peterson's the Huskies coach. He said that he's got some family things going on, which I obviously feel very bad for the linebacker in that regard, but he said closer to home, but he's from Reno, Nevada. And he may be going to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Something about that seems a little bizarre. But nonetheless, Alabama trying to work hard here and get in on a linebacker from the 2018 class who ended up signing with Washington. I have no idea why he's leaving Seattle there, but that is at least the report on that. I thought that South Carolina quarterback Jake Bentley had an interesting take on how summer practice is going for the Gamecocks, essentially saying that they want to throw deep every time they see man coverage and receiver. Now, they've obviously got a pretty talented group of wide receivers with Brian Edwards and Deebo Samuel. You sort of get that, but it sort of speaks to, once again, what seems like a real commitment to a very different offense for the Gamecocks. Brian McClendon, Dan Warner talked a lot during the spring about how up-tempo they want to be. Now you hear about how many deep throws they want to take during a game. You almost wonder if this is some sort of response to the line of scrimmage dominance that you think Georgia may show here this season. Gamecocks, played Georgia close for a half last year in Athens. That was a pretty toughly contested game. You think of Will Muschamp being cut from the same cloth as Kirby Smart, but with this kind of talk, more about razzle-dazzle offense than lines of scrimmage work. It's almost like Muschamp's moving the South Carolina program maybe in a slightly different direction right now. But obviously Bentley's a good quarterback. This could really make the Gamecocks kind of dangerous there. And then one more final story I want to get to. I saw where Dan Mullen at Florida was asked about the struggles of the Florida offense, the fact they've only averaged 30 points a game, and I think one season since Tim Tebow left the program. And Mullen said that wasn't really a surprise to him because he wasn't there, essentially insinuating that it was going to be better now that he's the Florida head coach. And boy, that's a lot of self-confidence for a guy in Mullen who does not have a ton to work with there at Florida. I do not believe they had a single player on that ESPN top 50 that I just referenced. But, man, Mullen is feeling good about himself right now. So we'll see how that plays out, and we'll make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, we had a lot of fun doing this yesterday, so I said, hey, why don't we keep this going here today? We're doing a great new video series for DawgNation called On the East. It's presented by Georgia's own credit union. It's a look at those key figures that may help Georgia stay on top in the division here this season, get back to Atlanta, and maybe get that rematch with Alabama in the SEC championship game. And there's no doubt that one of the guys that could factor in some way in that is one of the already most popular players in the team and maybe one of the most intriguing storylines. It's the true freshman Justin Fields. With Chip Towers, our buddy, let's take a closer look at Fields right now. Georgia's own credit union presents On the East. And look at the names to know as the Dogs try to get back on top of the division once again for 2018. Hello, everybody. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation's Chip Towers. And one of the names, Chip, that Georgia fans already seem to know a lot about is the incoming freshman quarterback, Justin Fields. But how big of a role will Fields play in the Dogs' attempt to own the East here this season?
Well, is that the million-dollar question or what? I mean, we can't wait to get into the preseason and into the season and kind of see where does Justin Fields just fit in. But when it comes to Georgia owning the East, the reason I have Justin Fields kind of far down on this list is that, for now anyway, he's the backup quarterback for whom there is no clear-cut role at this particular juncture. Now, can he play himself into that role? Will Georgia have a package for him? Will he outplay Jake Fromm at some point? All that's got to play out. I can promise you this, though, based on what I know from seeing Jake Fromm play last year, I don't see Justin Fields going into game one having unseated the starter from the national runner-up. So Justin Fields has some proving to do, but here's what I know. Georgia fans and Georgia coaches want to get him on the field as soon as possible and see what he does have to offer.
Here's something else I think that we can say with certainty, that Fields, no matter how much he plays here in 2018, brings a skill set that Georgia has not had in quite some time. This is a dynamic dual-threat quarterback, is it not?
Dual-threat quarterback in the purest sense of the word. And, I had a great conversation last year with DJ Shockley, who was probably the last true dual-threat quarterback that Georgia had that resembles Justin Fields. And as you can imagine, Mr. Shockley loves what Justin Fields brings to the table. But he also, as you will recall, had to kind of be patient before he got his opportunity. We'll have to wait and see whether Justin Fields has to be equally as patient.
No doubt about it. Justin Fields for Georgia should be a lot of fun to watch this fall. On the East is brought to you by Georgia's own credit union and Georgia's own Visa Signature Card, which gives 1.25 points for each dollar charged and can be redeemed for cashback, gift cards, travel, merchandise, and more. Check out georgiasown.org for more details. So good stuff there from Chip Towers. I think he's just done a great job on this On the East series, both in terms of his contribution to the videos there with Georgia's own credit union, also the written work here as well, as you really kind of look at these central storylines. And I think that Justin Fields, for the most part, is something not to be worried about or not to be, too concerned about. I think it's the kind of thing that's just sort of going to play out in an appropriate manner. I said yesterday, I don't think this veers into controversy the way that the Alabama situation seems to with Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa. This may be for UGA fans a whole lot more enjoyable of a ride. All right, we'll get ready to wrap up here today. We'll do our Gator Hater countdown. And you see, if you're watching on video, once again, that funny video of the Gators in their Halloween costumes. Bizarre as that was. And by the way, I don't know what's with UGA rivals doing this. I saw that Georgia Tech put a video out. It was very similar, also wearing the Halloween costume. So maybe there's something going on here I don't quite realize. But if that be the case, that'd be one of many things on the internet that I don't quite understand. But nonetheless, 81 days from right now, Georgia goes back to Jacksonville, gets another win over those lousy, stinking Gators. It's our Gator Hater Countdown right here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza. And, by the way, speaking of brand new video series, did you get a chance to catch the debut of DN90 yesterday? We call it DN90 because it's a 90-second look around the world of DawgNation. We're going to try to keep it to under 2 minutes, but it's a lot of fun. Dixie Vodka brings it to you. Check it out today. It'll be on the DawgNation video channels, and we'll see you tomorrow. All right, and for those of you who are with us on video right now, we are running a little bit late, so I don't have unfortunately, a ton of time for a lot of comments. I'll try to make time for a lot more tomorrow. Matt Rukavina says Florida's a clown college. Yeah, listen. Ironically, Florida State at one point in time was a clown college. Did y'all know this? That they had some sort of tie-in with Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. I may have some of the facts wrong on this, but I want to say that there was some sort of, you could actually go to Florida State to learn how to do the circus, I want to say, but maybe I don't quite have all the facts down on that. Keith Wilson brings up a good point. Today is Tuesday. 2 days from now on Thursday, Nick Chubb going to play at 7 p.m. I'm assuming there's national television for that. It'll be a lot of fun. Thanks. Y'all got to help me stay up to date on this preseason football stuff. I have a tendency to forget about some of that, so y'all help me remind me. Kibo Weir mentioning the Patriots waiving Malcolm Mitchell. Yeah, I actually wrote about that for our Good Day UGA piece this morning at DawgNation.com. But, yeah, Malcolm Mitchell is gone from New England. Still 3 former Dogs there with Boss Andrews and, of course, 2 first-round picks, Isaiah Wynn and Sonny Michel. But no more Malcolm Mitchell. No more Malcolm Mitchell in New England. Let me hit the YouTube comment section here for a minute as well. Check in with the folks there. Hope you're enjoying everything here today. Jeff Sintel was great. Please be with us for Before the Hedges tomorrow. That's going to be a lot of fun. Crow King reminding us that Javon Wims had a great first game for the Bears. Yeah, we actually played some of that audio. We don't have the kind of budget to be playing a bunch of NFL highlights, but we did play the audio of Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth there, throwing some praise Javon Wims' way. Recognizing what he did at Georgia and seeing some of that on the field for the Bears there, too. I thought the Bears actually did kind of a nice job of highlighting their guy with their own social media there. So it's kind of nice to see Wims get a little love there. And it's a reminder of just how challenging Wims is to replace there in that regard. Al Clemens got a question. He says the video shows August 6th. It does show August 6th. He says, I missed most of the show yesterday. Is this a Tuesday, DN, or is this Monday? Yeah, Al, if you're watching this right now, this is live on a Tuesday morning. Hopefully everything was okay with the YouTube broadcast yesterday. We're live on a Tuesday morning right now. So this is the Tuesday edition, the August 7th edition of the program. Zach Stuckey having some fun with Travis Nunley, what he said about Gatorade, and listen, Florida's got their share of issues. Whether it be Kadarius Toney or whomever else. Let me go over here to Facebook one more time. You see the link there to the Before the Hedges, reminding that's tomorrow at 3 p.m. Jeff and I are going to have a lot of fun doing that. Robert Smith says, probably right about Fromm and Fields for this year, meaning no controversy, but next year that you might see Kirby Smart in the same situation as Saban this year. I guess the one difference here, though, Robert, and here's where I think that I'm right, although, history shows that I can be wrong, is that I believe that Kirby Smart, and I take him at his word when he says he's committed to staging a legitimate competition. And you may not be happy with the results of a legitimate competition, but you can't deny what those results are. The players see with their own eyes who's better during practice. What I believe happened in Alabama last season was the players saw for the entirety of the year that Tua Tagovailoa had to have been out practicing Jalen Hurts, because I think that Tua is just way better than Hurts right now, and it's hard for me to believe that only began with the halftime of the national championship game. There had to have been a sneaking suspicion on the part of many that Tua was the better guy in comparison to Jalen Hurts, and yet Saban stuck with Hurts. And I think that runs the risk of giving Jalen Hurts a false sense of entitlement. He thinks he's the Alabama starter because he's earned it, when he's actually only been sort of given that job because it's a little too complicated to remove him from that status. for the most part, Alabama, with the exception of the one, I guess, close game against Mississippi State on the road, Alabama's playing opponents in which it can beat easily. It doesn't really matter who you play at quarterback. It makes Tua Tagovailoa confused because he wonders, what do I have to do to earn this job if I'm out playing my guy during practice? I'm not on the field. And it makes Jalen Hurts think that he's probably better than he really is here. I don't think Kirby Smart will get caught doing the same thing. Now, is there a point in time coming when maybe somebody, and take quarterback out of the equation here for a moment, look at all positions. Are guys going to get unhappy with Kirby Smart? Yes. There are probably some players unhappy with Smart right now that we just don't ever know about, don't ever hear about. On a roster as deep and talented as this one, there are guys, virtually all 85 of these players, think they're good enough to play, but not all of them will play. So you may hurt someone's feelings along the way. But I think that things only become a controversy when guys feel betrayed. And if you are simply calling balls and strikes on the result of a practice competition, at that point in time, there's very little room for betrayal. Let me get John Arena, then I got to get ready to get out of here, y'all. John says, BA, even though our defensive line doesn't have a lot of the depth of the starting 3 or 4, we're really strong, don't you think? Yeah, I think there's a really good chance of it being a pretty strong group. And I think those outside linebackers, to sort of think about it, not just in terms of defensive line, but sort of front 7 here, I think those outside linebackers have a chance to be really deep. I think Walter Grant, DeAndre Walker, 2 very interesting starters. And, freshmen like Adam Anderson, like Brenton Cox, we talked a lot about a moment ago, finding some way for these guys to be in the contribution and be in the fold. Now, I know there's also going to be some rotation of guys like Grant, maybe even Anderson in the star position just a bit, which is sort of an interesting thing to think about. But, that front 7 overall is pretty deep. So, kind of a lot of fun to think about. I apologize for the lack of comments here today. We do have to run, though. We have to get a couple things ready to go here. We'll try to save a lot more time and room for comments tomorrow. We really appreciate you being a part of the program. Hope you'll join us for 3 p.m. tomorrow afternoon for Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. And as Jeff said, the one thing that he and I both are very committed to is making comments a big part of what we do. You better believe I'm going to be peppering a lot of those in to the format, and we'll have a very, very relaxed conversation with a lot of you there in that regard. That's going to be a lot of fun. I will look forward to seeing you then, but also back tomorrow morning live at 10 a.m. Check out DN90, presented by Dixie Vodka on the DawgNation video channels here today. And read me. If they're going to let me write more, y'all got to read what I write. So go to DawgNation.com. It's the Good Day UGA piece. It's simply titled Revisiting the Dumbest Article in DawgNation History. It's me having some fun at my own expense. Check that out. And I'll see you tomorrow right here on DawgNation Daily Live, presented by Marco's Pizza. Y'all have a great day.